We can use double number lines to solve ratio problems. Grace runs 2 miles in 12 minutes. If she continues to run at the same rate, how many minutes will it take her to run 10 miles? We can use what we call a double number line to help us figure out the answer to this problem. A double number line are two number lines that are set up one on top of the other, and they're used to show us the ratios that we're comparing. It's really important when you create double number lines that you label each number line so you know which number of your ratio goes on which line. So in this case, we're comparing our miles to our minutes. Now, we know that if Grace were to run 0 miles, it would take her 0 minutes. So we're going to show that on our double number line by creating a line that connects these two numbers as a ratio, 0 miles for 0 minutes. Now if we look at our question, we can see that Grace runs 2 miles in 12 minutes. If I were going to put that on my double number line, I would make a line and I would say that she does 2 miles. So I put my 2 at the top number line because that's my miles number line in 12 minutes. So these two numbers go together like a pair. They are my ratio, 2 miles in 12 minutes. Now, number lines can help us because we can move forward and backwards on our number line. So for example, if we look at this first question here, it says, what is the unit rate that describes minutes per mile? That means I want 1 mile. Now we've done these problems before where we've set them up as a ratio, 2 miles, and she does that in 12 minutes. And we think about, okay, we don't want 2 miles, we want to know how long it takes for 1 mile. And what we would do is we would figure out, okay, to go from 2 miles to 1 mile, divide by 2. If I divide my numerator by 2, I need to divide my denominator by 2. So 12 minutes divided by 2 gives me 6 minutes, which means it takes her 6 minutes to run 1 mile. If I look at my double number line, I can find the same information. I know that 0 and 2, I know that 1 is right in the middle of that. It's kind of like going 2 divided by 2 to give me this 1 mile. If I were going to do that, I could do the same thing for my denominator and find out that it was 6 minutes. Okay? Now, we can show some other things on this as well. Our question says, how long will it take her to run 10 miles? Well, I can use this ratio. Remember, this is a ratio. Every time she runs 2 miles, it takes 12 minutes. I can use that information to help me out here. If she were to run another 2 miles, okay, another 2 miles, it would take another 12 minutes, which would be 24 minutes. So it would take her 24 minutes to run 4 miles. And I can keep this pattern going. What if she did another 2 miles? That would give her 6 miles. 6 miles, another 12 minutes would be 36 minutes. And I can keep going again. What if she did 8 miles? 8 miles would be another 2 miles, which would mean it would take another 12 minutes. And finally, last but not least, we wanted 10 miles, which is another 2 miles on top, which means it would be another 12 minutes on the bottom. And we can see that it would take her a total of 60 minutes to run 10 miles. Now there are some shortcuts when we're using this ratio, or this double number line. Okay? Just like when we used ratio tables, we can use multiplication to help us out. If I knew that 2 miles was 12 minutes, I can think, okay, to go from 2 miles to 10 miles, that's just times 5. So if I do my 12 minutes times 5, that will give me my 60 minutes. Okay? We could have also taken it all the way back to our unit rate and done the same thing. Once we knew it was 1 mile, we could have done times 10 to get our 10 miles, and 6 times 10 to get our 60 minutes. Okay? If we're talking about the relationship between the equation that we would have for miles and minutes, what we want to think about is what's going to happen to our miles in order to tell us how many minutes it is. And that's going to be based on our unit rate here. We know that however many miles she runs, Grace runs, it takes her 6 minutes for every mile. So we're going to take Grace's miles, we will multiply that by 6, and that will give us our total number of minutes. And we can see that in our double number lines too. If I take her miles and I multiply it by 6, I get however many minutes. So 8 times 6 is 48. So we can see that rule there as well. Now, this is the start of this number line that we had before. Okay? So it shows Grace running 1 mile in 6 minutes, and it got us all the way up to how long it would take her to do 10 miles. There's another question here that I want us to look at. It says Grace decides she wants to run a half a marathon. Half a marathon is 13 miles. How many minutes will it take her to run 13 miles? So we can figure out based on this 10 miles in 60 minutes. We can continue on. She ran 11 miles. We know that for every 1 mile we add, it's going to be 6 more minutes. So 11 miles would be 66 minutes. 12 miles, which again we're adding 1 more mile up top, so we're going to add 6 more minutes down here, which would give us 72 minutes. And finally our 13 miles, which is 1 more mile and 6 more minutes, would be 78 minutes. So it would take her 78 minutes to run 13 miles. Now if Grace decides to go for a run that lasts for 2 hours, she says, I'm not going to worry about how many miles I'm running. I just want to make sure I run for 2 hours. But then at the end she says, wow, I wonder how many miles that was. How can we figure that out? So here, let me get rid of this for a minute. It'll help us see things. We can take this information that we had for our 10 miles, because we know that she did 10 miles in 1 hour. We know this is an hour because 60 minutes is 1 hour. So if instead of 1 hour, if what we wanted was 2 hours, what we would need to do is multiply this times 2, because 60 minutes times 2 gives me 120 minutes. And we know that 2 hours is 120 minutes. So if I can figure out how far she ran in 120 minutes, I'll know how far she ran in 2 hours. So if I multiply this amount on the bottom, 60 minutes, by 2, I need to multiply her number of miles by 2. And we can see that in 2 hours, she would run 20 miles.